I am joined with Tara Joslin. She is a fine arts teacher with Virtual Arkansas. And we're going to be talking about the test standard and indicator 2A, creating an environment of respect and rapport. I'm Kirsten Wilson. I'm Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And today I'm going to be asking Tara just a few questions about how she creates an environment of respect and rapport with her students in an online environment. Welcome, Tara.
I think that it's important to set up guidelines and model those guidelines in advance. This way, if a problem arises, you know how to respond. And when it comes to Zoom meetings, I set up norms at the very beginning of the semester. So things like use the chat box only for Zoom topics, or have your headphones on as you enter or when you're logging in so that you can hear me right away, or you can hear if there's a problem if your sound is not working. Keep your camera directed at your face so you don't have students who have their camera up on a ceiling or on another student. And I tell them things that they could use their virtual hand if they want to speak or ask a question. And sometimes they'll just raise their hand, which is fine with me because I can see them. And oftentimes I just ask them to ask questions in the chat. But I encourage them to unmute and answer questions or ask questions. But a lot of times students at first don't feel comfortable doing that. And that's fine with me. I try to respect that. Sometimes they won't ever feel comfortable talking in Zoom because it's not easy to get used to. And when you're seeing students from all over, I've had students come in and they're surprised that they don't know anybody in their Zoom classroom. And I just remind them, yeah, that's because we have students from all over the state who come into our meetings. So they like that, and also they're intimidated by it. So it's a practice. They have to start out getting comfortable with it. And then you have students who are comfortable right away, and you have students who grow into that. And that's okay. It's something that you just have to model, and hopefully you get to that point.
That's really good. So that sounds like you take into account experiences that students have and maybe even personalities and how comfortable they feel. You may have introverts and extroverts. And so part of the learning process is just having a respect for wherever that student is, and then just encouraging them where they are to show their learning in whatever way they feel comfortable, with the hope that they may get more comfortable with different ways of expressing themselves. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. Sometimes the only interaction I have with a student is through feedback on assignments or on messages that I send within my course. And this means that the only interaction they have with me is written. And it's really important that they understand my tone. And that can be very difficult to read. I mean, we've all read those emails where you wondered, are they being rude? But they might not be. That's just how they wrote it. So I try to do things like include emojis or smiley faces. In feedback, I will use the sandwich method. And so I'll give them feedback on what they've done by giving them something positive. And then I might ask them a question rather than saying, oh, you didn't include color in your description of the artwork. I would say, what colors did the artist use in the work? How can we talk about those colors? Where do you see them? Or I might mention things that they did great within the assignment and tell them ways that they can improve on it. Like they might have the answer there, but they didn't organize it well. So I would just mention, maybe if you use what you said here, you somewhere else, and then I just tell them, I just try to be encouraging towards them because, I mean, this is all new to them. For some students, they've never done work this way. And so they're probably nervous about getting that information out to their instructor to begin with. I also try to personalize my messages to them. And sometimes I'll make videos if I think it's easier for them to understand if I explain it to them. Plus, they get my tone that way because they can see my face, they can hear my voice, and that helps a lot as well. Listening should be modeled by the instructor first, for sure. In a Zoom meeting, I find it important to look at the camera when I'm speaking to students. There might be other things open on my computer, or I'm reading something and going back to it. But looking at the camera is as though I'm looking them in the face. And then also doing things like smiling, nodding my head, that's active listening. And we do this naturally, just, when we're face to face with someone. And then I try to respond in ways that validate what the student said, especially when we're discussing important course topics. I want to listen to what they said, respond to that, and then bring it further so that they have a better understanding of the topics. And then in course discussions, I'll make comments on students in a way that validates what they said and encourage students to respond to others in the same way. It's tempting for students to say things like, "I agree," or "good job" to their classmates, which are nice comments. They're not bad, but I encourage them to move the conversation forward. And I have to model that at first because they might not understand what that even means. So I'll comment in a way that furthers that conversation, and so that they can do that as well.
So it sounds like some of the things that you're doing helps students become more owners of, or take on the responsibility of, also creating a community of respect and rapport. Do you find that to be true as you start to model that both in Zoom and through the discussion threads, that students start to pick up on that and then they start to carry that as part of the responsibility of being in a community of learners?
Yes, I've had students, you have those moments where students will answer a question or make a comment either in Zoom or even in discussions, and then they'll say, not to piggyback on what so-and-so said, they'll start making those references to each other's comment, and then you've made it. You've got them communicating, and we're all into this together and learning together mode.
Excellent. You have really highlighted some very important things in regards to the standard and indicator environment of respect and rapport, Tara, and I really appreciate you sharing with us the strategies and approaches that you take with students. So thank you for joining us today and sharing with us in regards to this particular area in tests.
Thank you for having me.
In this previous discussion with Ms. Joslin, we talked about the indicator 2A, environment of respect and rapport. And one of the things that was really evident in this conversation was her genuine respect and caring for her students and groups of students within the online learning environment. She clearly evoked a rapport and respect that showed that students trust her, and she worked to foster a community of learners with mutual respect. If you recall, she created a situation where she modeled that environment, and then she's made the statement that she knew that students had basically arrived at being that community of learners when they took on those discussions, either in Zoom or through discussion boards, where they started to comment on each other's conversations in such a way that it furthered the learning. Students genuinely cared for one another and monitored each other, and you could see this as they respectfully addressed each other through discussion boards and also through Zoom conversations, and had an understanding of the community's norms for respect and rapport. She utilized encouragement, practices active listening to students, and then also encouraging students to actively listen to one another. She modeled how they took turns within Zoom, whether they used their digital hand for raising, made communication in chat, or through a controlled environment, they had them unmute and then share out their information. There was warmth in both her communication, both in Zoom and how she provided feedback or through video, or the use of the LMS messaging or through email. She also demonstrated fairness and had an awareness and an understanding that students had different environments or backgrounds outside of the academic course itself that could play into the learning of that student, and took that into account. She used the different techniques of politeness in her conversations, and she had regular contact with students, both through the Zoom as well as through other modalities of communication. And she always focused on welcoming facial expressions and that kind of open-handedness that you would have in a Zoom environment to make it feel welcoming and warm as students were in Zoom, but also express that through her communication using the technique of emojis or smiley faces in that communication, and the technique of the sandwich method, where she would compliment them on something they were doing, give them some critical feedback, and then follow up with another compliment of some kind in the feedback that she did, in order for that student or students to feel that they were getting that respect and rapport within that learning environment. I appreciate you listening and hearing about this reflective feedback, and as you utilize this information to coach your teachers as they move from that basic to proficient and distinguished area, I hope that this gives you some ideas and some ways that you can support your teachers who are learning to teach in an online environment, whether through a blended approach or fully online. Thank you.